different profs come and go, and you really wonder, like, man, did I miss out? Or I wish I would have gone at this time, or it would have been cool if I had had more time with this person. But you realize that in the sovereignty of God, he wants you to go through what you go through.
Yeah, right.
And he's going to use that. And so that I have to agree wholeheartedly that Phoenix Seminary, when I was there, was exactly what I needed at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. We're going to be interviewing Jeff Palen, and we've got it in 3 parts. The first part is who he is, his background, how he got saved. The second part is his life and ministry here at Center Church. And the third part is his plans, hopes, and dreams for planting a church in Boise, Idaho.
So if you're hearing one of the parts right now, stay tuned for the following week to hear your next part. Part 2.
Now, in the time frame you're going to Phoenix Seminary, you discover a church on Cooper Road between Baseline and
its name at this
Guadalupe.
time?
Yeah, just before Phoenix, actually.
I don't recall Mark Johnson Jr. And so,
It had this really weird name that was hard to spell.
yeah.
People of Destiny?
Nope.
Oh.
Sovereign Grace.
Yep.
It's I before E, except after C, and in Sovereign. And so we had that here. So talk to us, like, when did you come to this church, and what were your thoughts when you got here?
Yeah, we came in October of, man, now that I think about this, it's going to be hard to remember. Right before starting seminary. So it had to have been like 2015, October. And I remember the first time we came, sitting in the, I always want to say the pews because I did grow up Baptist.
Yeah, there's no pews.
But there's never been pews here to my knowledge.
No, there's never been.
Sitting in one of the rows in the back and just being overwhelmed with sort of shock and awe, if you will, that the way that the Lord was made to be glorious in our eyes in every way in the service. So in the singing, in the preaching, in all the liturgy, and it was overwhelming.
Why? Because, like, if people have been coming here for a while, I remember you talking about this, and this is all they know. What for you was different?
Yeah, so it's simple for somebody that doesn't spend a lot of time in a church that's minded like ours. And it comes down to the fact that Jesus is the one that we're here to celebrate. And there's much to celebrate.
Yeah, right.
So that's the simple part of it. But what maybe is difficult for people that don't spend a lot of time in other traditions is that there's a very big pull to draw people in and to sort of try to make the church feel palatable.
Uh-huh.
And so the misunderstanding in that approach for many is that we need to speak to things that they care about.
Like how to have a happy Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
3 ways to...
Is that... No, totally. I'm not joking.
That's legit.
That's like, that would be a sermon, correct? How to have a good Thanksgiving with your family, if
Yeah.
like, or
3 ways to be a better person.
or even just like how to have a successful school year from a parent's perspective or a kid's perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which good topics, but is that a sermon? Should that be a sermon?
Man. Yeah. If we can do it expositionally,
I don't know how we
could look
could.
to
I'm
the-
not.
and we look to
No,
the-
stop. Don't give anybody any ideas, Mark.
Yeah.
We have Jeff. We have legions of fans, and I don't want us. I'm not going to do a sermon series on.
Yeah.
Let's live your best Thanksgiving now or anything
Right.
like that.
right. Yeah. So it's sort of like when you start to think that the only kind of meal you're going to be able to have is what's served up at a fast food chain
Or Golden Corral,
or Golden Corral.
right?
Shout out to Golden
And you're
Corral.
like-
No,
Our
shout
sponsor.
out. No, they're not.
Yeah, and then you find yourself like really trying to compare, like, McDonald's Big Mac with Jack in the Box, whatever, and that's how you're gauging the quality. And then all of a sudden you step into a newly, like, fresh from scratch home cooked meal that is made by people that love you and love the things that you love, and you dive into that and you're like, why would that ever have appealed to me? I mean, it's easy and it serves a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
But it just is not the same.
Well, and it's not as if Jeff's not saying that like we're the most gifted people he's ever seen, but one of the vision, what we're about at Center Church is making sure that what we do is focus on the person and work of Jesus.
Yeah.
And make sure that the application of that person and work is something that we don't move on from.
Right.
It's not just for unbelievers; it's for all of us, and it's on a regular basis, a Sunday in, Sunday out, regular basis, right?
And all those tertiary things that those other groups might want to address can only be adequately addressed through the person work of Christ.
Right.
So we would say yes and amen. We need to see
Absolutely.
those things addressed, but they are certainly only addressed adequately through Christ.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And then when you arrived here, how quickly did you become involved in the life of the church here, and in what ways?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we really took our time, just because we had previous history with other churches where we needed to be sure that this is where we were gonna hit.
Come and observe a little bit.
Yeah, so we probably waited a year to pursue membership, which was probably kind of fast for some. And then after that, we essentially tried to connect in a small group. And so we went with a really great little small group that we met a lot of really wonderful people in, and did that for a number of years. And then the leader of our small group had a career that made it difficult for them to be able to lead the small group consistently. And so just worked with them and said, hey, I'd love to help if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And so eventually started leading that small group. And then at the same time, I had connected with Rich and Trey, and I'd actually asked Trey to mentor me through the seminary process.
So you're in seminary at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So I had basically started seminary probably like 6 months or so. Well, I'm trying to think now. It would have been the fall, or no, maybe spring semester. I'm trying to remember after
After you got here in October.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember how it lines up. My memories.
It's all
obviously
good.
not that great.
It's all
Yeah.
I did hit my head a lot in high
You're a
school.
football player to get some concussions.
Yep. So that's basically
Yeah.
how it kind of looked. But we, meeting with those guys, was tried to be careful to express my desire, and just wanted to see if the Lord was going to draw out the call.
What do you mean when you say, for some people who don't know, what do you mean by the call?
Yeah, so around age 16, like I said, sensed a call from the Lord, and then to watch that not dissipate at all over that period of life, and then wanting to be in a church where that was really, I wanted to be sure that wasn't something that I was just like had personally wanted to aspire to, but that was something that the church
Right.
recognized and said, yeah, this would be good.
Like confirmation of what
Exactly.
you're feeling.
That's
The
probably
Lord's.
an easier way of putting it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's essentially kind of the way I wanted to approach it. I just said, hey, I think this is what's going on, but I really would really prefer you guys would confirm that's the case before we do anything about it.
Yeah, so I definitely got some follow-ups in that area. You said you had Trey mentoring you.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a wise choice. Rich as well.
Go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was your timeline like from the time you arrived here, currently going to seminary, also having a job, also building your family? How long were you exploring that? Or when did it become apparent to you that those around you in the life of the church was like, I think you got something here. I think you're gifted in speaking. I think you're gifted in preaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be a good question for Rich, probably.
We're going to get him another time.
Well, no, because I'm a part of that process here.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So
I was a part of that. So
yeah, then it goes to both of you.
well, we started meeting, grabbing coffee, started talking about his education and stuff, and what he was doing and what he wanted to do. And then in God's plan that we didn't know, our church went through some challenges in 2018 and 19. And I remember we sat at Coffee Rush on Val Vista Road.
Little plug there.
Yeah, little plug. And there's the creepiest picture you ever saw.
There?
Yes, absolutely.
Or of you two?
No, of the proprietor.
Careful.
There's like I love this.
We just lost a
it's
sponsor.
a great place. They're not a sponsor.
It's an artistic.
It's not artistic.
Yeah.
It's a picture of him from when he was a baby all the way till like his current age, all the way around, like
which is very
circle.
creative. We want to be
whatever.
nice.
Okay,
the
that's
people
fine.
that-
So anyways, I think it's creepy, but it's a great place for coffee. And so we would talk, and at one point Jeff said, I'm willing and able and ready to do anything that would help the church.
Here am I, send me.
Well, we didn't have to go anywhere, but
Yeah,
like, here am
yeah.
I, use me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, we need somebody to help lead youth. And that was not on the
Choir
top.
the Fire? Or,
No. Well, that wasn't on the top of his list, right? I mean, his first response wasn't like awesome. That was what I was hoping for. It was more like,
right.
well, if that's what we need, right?
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
well, how would you, if you, in your words, when he suggested youth, what did you think about that at that time? Or what were you hoping he said? I guess would be a good question.
I do remember distinctly not having something in mind.
Okay, that's good.
I think if I remember right, it wasn't just a sort of placating, like, oh, I'll do whatever. I really hope you pick me to, preach every other week or something like that.
No, he wasn't doing that.
No?
No,
Put that down pretty
No,
quick.
he wasn't having that attitude.
Oh, okay,
You're
okay.
thinking the worst over there, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think, for sure, youth was not something that I had a passion for. And I mean, if we're really being honest with each other,
We want to be honest on Fix on
Yes.
Jesus podcast.
That's right.
like that, it's probably rare. It's probably rare that people are passionate and run into.
absolutely.
I mean, that just in my experience.
About youth.
Usually.
Yeah, and it's not
Makes me
about
feel better.
youth. It's just more of like that's a very difficult like ministry
Yeah.
to work in.
It's transitory. People come and go.
There's
Yeah.
revolving door constantly. There's a ton of attrition.
Mostly unbelievers.
Yeah.
You're predominantly serving parents,
Right.
more than students.
Wow.
Well, and then also like he's getting his degree to like a seminary degree, and people in seminary aren't thinking, man, I want to go be a youth leader, essentially.
Not many.
Not many, but a lot of them start that way.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't necessarily the thing that was on the top of his list, but he's like, yeah, I'll do it.
This seems like a really common thing amongst a lot of churches where they have newer pastors in the youth role. Is that just kind of the model that everyone uses, or is it just where the need
Model.
was?
It's just, I don't worry about models.
Are the leaders transitory too?
Hopefully not. Well, sometimes in some places.
We would be unusual in that
We're-
they're pretty consistent.
We stick, we're less transitory than most. What Jeff said, I'll jump in and serve. But also concurrent to that, we were rebuilding our team, right? And so like we had a transitional temporary advisory committee team that I believe stopped meeting in 2019, right? And so we kicked into our official team, like making up Jeff and Frank and Trey and Steve and me in 2009, August of 2019, if memory serves. So we're 5 years on from that. So Jeff jumps into that as well, which is, given what we were going through at the time, it was quite a to be willing to do that was significant. And so, Zach, I forgot Zach. Zach's on that too. Sorry, Zach. But I don't think he listens. So it's
No, he doesn't.
he's not. I don't worry about offending him. So anyway, so we're all in there, and then Jeff. So Jeff's a part of that, going to seminary and leading youth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I just jumped in and I was, steering the car. There was a lot of people involved still that I got to learn from and work with. And so it was definitely, I would say I had like a ramp up time.
Yeah.
Probably easily over like a 6-month period or so. I was ramping into that sort of main driver leadership role.
Yeah, yeah. So just to follow up a little bit on youth, how did you see the Lord working on your heart as you took over the youth, and how did that confirm or grow your calling to preach and teach the word?
Oh, that's a good question. So to me, it started when one of the first things we did was we used to have a class, like a Sunday school class, really, that was during the service in one of the classrooms here for the 5th grade or 6th graders, I think it was. And when we would teach them, scripture, but teach it in a way that was more contemplative and thinking sort of the results of what's being taught in the scripture, watching them react to that in a way that was really not expected. And then seeing the way that the conversation blossomed out of that to me was like, I could do this all day.
Yeah.
And that, I think for me anyway, watching the word take hold of somebody and then they're suddenly just sitting there rethinking all of the implications and the way that it impacts, and they sort of have to stop and like, wait a minute, I've been doing the arithmetic all wrong all this time. I need to go back and rethink this. That to me is really encouraging. And so that was super helpful.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So if there's someone listening to this and they're considering pastoral ministry, what would you say to them? What would you tell them to do? Serve, lead? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say the first thing you need to do is be a part in a membership of a church.
Yeah.
And you need to find someone that will disciple you and help you, and know that you will be taught and led exactly the way you need to be at that time in your life. The Lord is not going to drop the ball. And so it will oftentimes not feel like it's fast enough. It will oftentimes not feel like it's promoting the way that you want, or it's not leading to opportunities the way that you want. But the Lord is in control of that and will use whoever is there caring for you to lead you exactly the way that you need to be led at that time.
That's beautiful. Just you're painting a good picture of his sovereignty and claim on your life and how it could be on someone else's.
Amen.
That's great. So just to kind of change gears, what was it like your first few times preaching here? And I'm assuming.
So yeah,
go ahead.
He taught and led in youth, and then I don't remember. You didn't preach during COVID? I think
was that online?
Summer, huh?
Was the COVID all online preaching?
I think you had us doing a lot of the upfront stuff well before preaching.
Yeah, right. So like he would do communion, he would do pastoral prayers, he would do announcements, he would do things like that, just to have some reps in front of everybody. And I think the first time you preached was 2020, sometime in 2020 or 21.
Yeah, I want to say it was maybe January.
I think so. Yeah. When we realized, hey, Jeff's going to plant a church, I wanted to give him chances to be able to preach weeks in a row.
Yeah.
So like in sequential weeks. So he would do that often, and he did this the last 2 Julys. You didn't do that this July.
At least twice, 2 years before that, though.
Yeah, and then 3 times in a row.
Yep.
Partly because when I got here, when I first started, I had never preached 2 weeks in a row in my life. Mm-hmm. And so like doing that's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
Preaching one off, like that's not as hard as trying to do every week. And so we wanted to give Jeff that kind of exposure. And so
grateful for that.
He's been able to begin doing that. All right, some of the roles, responsibilities and stuff, Jeff, that you've done here, in addition to leading youth, talk to us about some of the stuff you've done here.
Yeah, so being passionate about my education obviously led to a desire to share that for the church and to see a vision for that for the local church. And so with the elders, decided it would be a really good thing for us to offer some regular forms of classroom type learning. And so we initiated...
Which probably is your passion. Like if you were to think about like what gets you up out of bed, it's that like...
Teaching?
I would say that. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's like writing with my right hand.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way.
I got to sit into some of those classes and they were wonderful.
Yeah.
Indeed. Thanks. Yeah, so we initiated... but kind of up to that point, we had only really done classes periodically.
Right.
So always good content, really great content. We have a lot of gifted men in the church, but I think we had a vision as an eldership to see that regular. And so Core Studies was initiated to create a sort of consistent offering of courses that we could provide the church every week, essentially, that focus both on theology, biblical studies, and introducing and understanding church membership. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way that we...
And one of the things I really appreciate about what Jeff did is he took our statement of faith and really walked through a lot of that over... It was really a 3-year period for anybody who would take advantage of it. And so there was book studies of the Bible. There were some topics, good theological discussion as well. So that took a lot of your time over the time you were an elder.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about that. You were ordained. I mean, we briefly mentioned it. You're ordained as an elder in 2021.
Right.
Here.
Yep.
Along with Steve Tong.
Yeah.
Shout out to Steve.
Steve, you've been serving on the elder team, but yet being bivocational.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, correct?
It's unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unique.
Yeah, it's different. Are you looking forward to when you plant not having to have 2 different hats?
As much as I can. I would say I don't know what it's going to be like.
It's going to be hard.
To be fair. So yeah.
No, but
I think I'm really looking forward to being able to get out of bed and know that I can, put my foot down and get to hand a plow in regards to serving the church. When you're bivocational, it's not really a different thought process. It's just I have to wait maybe a couple hours before I can talk to this person or or work on this project or something like that.
Yep. So you've preached a good bit here. You have done some counseling and discipleship. Yes.
Yep.
You've obviously led, like to lead youth. That's, you might not know, like when it comes to leading a ministry, probably the hardest ministry to lead outside of Sunday morning is youth because of all the staff, the people who are serving, right? The kids that you want to care for, the connections to all the different families in the church. So it's not it's a fully orbed kind of ministry that takes a lot
Very
of
dynamic.
time and energy. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell everyone that cares to ask that you really are not, the youth are just one group that you're looking to serve. You're really serving families. You're serving the youth, obviously, and then you're serving the leaders.
Right.
So you're at one point or another always looking in three different directions at the same time, trying to do the best to serve them all effectively.
And in our context, one of the best ways you can prepare to plant a church is by being a youth leader because you have to wear multiple different hats.
Yeah.
Which when he started out as youth leader, it wasn't like we thought this was long term. And we didn't even really have planting on the horizon.
No, not even close.
Yeah,
Well,
we
I
weren't
want to ask
thinking
about
about
that eventually.
it. Yeah.
How did that, with
Sure.
the
Yeah.
switch, you guys had the little switch move.
Yeah, right. It was crazy, but yeah, for sure. That was pretty big. I mean, so he's functioning on the team, and throughout that time, we had a church discipline situation you got to watch, and we talk about, and he got to see that kind of in the front row.
Yeah.
There are lots of different. You have to make governing decisions on the team, and so he got to see that. We talked through what sermon series to do. We talked through all kinds of different things, and so he got to have that kind of experience on the team there.
Yeah.
And then you would. What else? I mean, that's pretty much the size of what you did, yeah.
Well, yeah, but let's be honest. I mean, what is happening in all of those things is there is a formation taking place and interacting between the two of us.
Yeah, right.
That was at times.
All right, here we go. Here's the gravy, guys.
Maybe at times we were learning where some of the rough edges were predominantly on myself.
I think both of us. I mean, we definitely had some spirited conversations. I think.
All right.
I think it's fair to say that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
He's intimidating with that beard too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Nah. And he's a teddy bear.
Yeah, I could see if you're in high school, like we talked about earlier, maybe it's intimidating.
Not now.
But not now.
I think Jeff and I had to hash out a lot of different. We had lots of really spirited conversations. Everything was new. We're coming off a challenge for him, and then there's other new members of the team. So this was unique for us because our team, we had to shift we had three people leave abruptly with very little conversation. We want to make sure we have a plurality, and a plurality is not just something that's a preference.
Right.
A plurality is something we believe is biblical, and so we felt like we had to move quick to get called and qualified men to be able to serve, and Jeff was one of those men. And in part, it was kind of at the beginning, it was a test run. Is this going to work? And so we had to do both work, like the governance of the church.
Yeah, work has to happen.
And like the formation and like the conversation, is this a fit for you? Are you a fit for us? That kind of thing.
Right.
Because you got to be able to work together.
Yeah.
You got to be able to, catch the vision of what the direction of the church is and all that kind of stuff. And, Jeff and Zach and Frank, they came in at just a real tough time for us, and Steve at the time wasn't ordained. And so we were really, at the time, it was just my dad and I as elders, which is, we don't.
Coleman's.
Yeah, we don't want that. I wanted them involved quickly just because we're both related, right? And that's not going to be a recipe for real good plurality. And so Jeff was thrown into the deep end quick.
Yeah.
All those guys were. And so I feel bad for sort of the experience of things because normally on a normal team that I've led, there would be time to be able to ramp up, time to be able to get your feet wet, stop, assess things. But with Jeff, it would just go. With Zach, it was just go. With Frank, it would just go. I mean, there was just no time.
Yeah.
We're trying to do the work and business of the church and keep things together. And so it was with baling wire and chewing gum. A lot of times we got things.
Wait, what? What and what? Chewing gum and what?
Baling wire. Google it. It's a metaphor. Jeff understands.
All right.
Yeah.
And so by the seat of our pants in a lot of ways. And so
I know that one.
that's part of what made some of this unique. And so realistically, the culture wasn't when you're starting fresh with everybody, the culture wasn't really established.
Right.
So we had to establish a culture together, and that just takes time. you know?
Yeah.
And so
But that was all very formative for all of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, nobody would choose to go into the pressure cooker, but when you see the result, you're kind of like, well, yeah, this was clearly providence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Iron sharpening iron kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, there's a lot of sharpening. At one point, Jeff, we had a conversation, and Jeff said, "Like what I went through, this isn't the normal way, right?" And I'm like, "No." And I said, "I've been telling you that a long time, but now you're seeing it, right?" Yeah. And I'm like, "This is not how it normally goes." But the Lord, it's the Lord's plan. We believe in a sovereign, all-powerful God, and that's the way He lined it up for us. And originally, the plan was for Jeff to become. He was going to be on staff, and my dad was going to retire as he has, and counseling was going to sort of be what his.
As your dad's was.
As my dad's was, right.
Just transition between the two of us.
Yeah. And so then, but then at the same time, I'm seeing, here's Jeff. He's passionate about teaching. He establishes a youth camp that just had its third, or is it is fourth?
Fourth year. Yeah.
Fourth year,
Finished our
100
fourth
kids,
one.
100
Wow.
kids.
That was epic.
100 kids were at the camp this last year. And so Jeff establishes that. That's one of the biggest accomplishments. In addition to all the things that you've done, that's one of the things that we can look back and go,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen without Jeff. And so I'm seeing, here's a guy who has the capacity and the gifting to counsel, but what really gets him up out of bed is taking biblical truth and transferring it to other people, right? And so we started having those conversations. Remember that?
Yeah, that's sort of, again, very formative. Yeah. You weren't saying anything we both didn't know. We just weren't really sure what it looked like
Yeah.
with what we had in front of us.
Yeah, it was more like, I was like, listen, bro, God's made you a certain way. Because he said, no, I can counsel. I can counsel. I could, sit in a desk and counsel. And I said, in 5 years, you'll be going crazy. I think I remember saying that, something like that. I think you should really pray and consider, just like if you're not called to preach and teach on a regular basis. And so let's set aside what that means. Let's set aside how that works. Let's set aside where all that's supposed to go and say, let's just look at Jeff Palen right now and not our church. And like the way God made you, that's the way God made you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because sometimes in church settings, you can get all locked up in what we need, what's now, what's tomorrow, what's next month.
Yep.
Not necessarily like, what has God made me to do? Now, sometimes you have to just sort of swallow that and just keep going down the road, and maybe the Lord will open a door another time. But I felt like we would not be stewarding His gifting if we didn't ask that question.
Yeah, and it just makes me think of, you've been leading a church and a team for a long time, and part of your gifting is to recognize other people's gifting and see where we can best, give that gift for the building up of the church and for the body of Christ. And it sounds like, from the outside, I wasn't a part of any of this, it sounds like you guys were recognizing together that Jeff was a teacher and a preacher more so than a counselor. Not that he isn't a good counselor, but is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and truthfully, that could have come up a number of different ways, but it really was Rich's initiative and leadership that made that as painless as possible.
Yeah.
Because more than likely, Rich is right. 5 years go by, and there's some discontent, and then we're talking about a totally different kind of issue.
Yeah.
And which is not good for the church.
Right.
At least has the potential. So,
Well, and we're also trying to think, okay, we want to establish here again, we want to establish to the church, elders stay for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not like a revolving door. Like
which
it
is
felt.
unusual,
It is.
frankly.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's unusual.
Unless we decide as a team and as a church to send, like as we send Jeff and the team to Greater Boise, that's something we're doing as a church, right?
Yeah.
And so but at the same time, I wanted to make sure, let's make sure before we just make this decision to slot you in a staff position, that it needs to be 5, 7, 10 years. Let's make sure that you're fitted for that.
For that long, for the duration.
Yeah.
So for some people who don't know, and even myself, there was another thing going on around this time where we thought we sent someone to the pastor's college.
You can name him.
We sent Frank Lundy to the pastor's college.
Yep.
Shout out to Frank. And then
he doesn't listen either.
He doesn't listen. Yeah, okay. We're working on that. So
we have legions of fans, but not Frank, not Zach. But anyway, keep going.
But Steve listens. Steve listens now. Okay. Yeah. So as a church, we sent Frank Lundy to the pastor's college with the intention of him coming back and planting a church relatively locally.
We had prayed about Mesa. Yeah.
Prayed about Mesa. And Jeff was going to stay here on staff.
Yep.
And then at some point, looking from the outside in, and I heard a little bit about it, that shifted. Can you walk us through how you guys walked through that as a team, but also how the Lord was pulling on different strings that all worked out together?
Well, hold on to that thought, Mark. I'm sorry to leave you all with a cliffhanger, but we need to save the rest for next week. You've been listening to the Fixed on Jesus podcast from Center Church of Gilbert, Arizona. This has been a special 3-part interview with Jeff Palen, and next week is the final installation. We're going to learn more about Jeff and church planning and the role that we all play. If you've got questions or comments, send us an email, production@centergilbert.com. We thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.